Monday. Let's start seated. Nice comfy seat. The most important, most sought after, most impactful shape in yoga. Finding your way into a space where the spine feels like it's supporting you without effort. Success. Nice work, Skip. And then from that place of no effort, let's try to relax in. Let our Monday soften. We'll give ourselves about 60 more seconds here. Just feeling into that ease of your spine. And then as it feels appropriate, we'll let the eyes blink open. Let's take the hands out, kind of 90-degree bend to the elbow, and just have the hands in front of us. We'll roll the wrists a little bit. Starting in whichever direction feels easiest. Leave us the challenging direction. And then when it feels appropriate, we'll reverse that direction. Just some nice wrist rolls. Fatigue in the forearms are possible here. I always note that because we don't do this very often. Last 10 seconds here. And then when it feels appropriate, we'll relax out of that wrist roll. Take our right arm and just extend it straight out from the shoulder. So we roll right out from that shoulder space. And then with the left hand, let's just push that back of the hand, that right hand down. Trying to catch a little of this lateral edge forearm musculature. You can kind of push into those fingers to increase the intensity. You're not feeling much. Should explain that better. You can push into those right fingers, activating that right hand. And then we'll relax. And we'll do the same thing to the left side. So hand comes out at shoulder height, hand drops down. And then with that right hand, we just start to press that back. And then pushing those fingers if you feel like you want some more activation. Left fingers away from you this time. And then we'll relax. And let's transition to hands and knees tabletop. As you get in tabletop here, you may feel the forearms are different. And that might feel like weakness. It might feel like some instability here. Try to push those fingers out and really activate that wrist musculature. And then let's exhale out. We'll tuck the chin, tuck the tailbone, round the middle of the back. Get that big full flexion. And then inhale, drop the belly, lift the tailbone, lift the chin. Big full extension. And we'll exhale and round the middle of the back, tuck the chin, tuck the tailbone, working through these spinal articulations at your own pace, at your own breath now. But really trying to get into the full range so that we play through the full movement that is possible here. And focus on full articulation into the corners of the ranges of motion, really trying to find that full range of motion. We'll give ourselves just about 30 more seconds here. Not a ton of time, but enough time to get any last little spots out of the way. And then when you feel right, we'll relax, release, come back to neutral. Let's sink right back into child's pose. A child's pose that allows you to completely land. I really like that as the goal, especially in child's pose, is landing. Although every shape in its own way has a landing point. Child's pose feels just like one of those that you can really fully trust into without a lot of concern for balance, stability, just ease. We'll give ourselves just about 15 more seconds here. And then when it feels appropriate, we'll pull ourselves forward to hands and knees tabletop. From hands and knees tabletop, little sway to the hips. Thinking about kind of all the directions we can move our spine before we move anything else. Or too much else, I guess. And then we'll bring our tailbone back to neutral, curl our toes, lift our seat, and find our way back into down dog. As you get back into that down dog, think for the first time about or direct your consciousness towards your feet. And then come up onto the tiptoes. Think about how the arches of the feet are responding, and then release back into the heels. And then let's come up onto the tiptoes, and we'll release back into the heels. And then one more time, let's do that same thing, tiptoes, and then release into the heels. And then we'll walk our way forward into fold. In your fold, find your full depth, and we'll take a little half lift. And then release all the way back into your fold. Letting your body settle, then drift your awareness to your sacrum. We'll roll ourselves up vertebrae by vertebrae. Let's come into that top space, and let's interact with our ball. So we'll start out on that right foot. and work in the arch here. And we're just going to go, see if I can show that, just kind of from the toe mound to that top of the calcaneus bone, and we'll just work back and forth in that arch. In theory, right, as the ball travels here, you can see it's not true in my foot, but in theory, as you travel back and forth, this should just be smooth, fluid musculature. There's some transverse arch work, but that should have a relatively consistency, texture. But it's not always that way. So as you're working back and forth, if you feel those little pockets of rigidity, stuckness, maybe you pause there. Maybe you offer a little rotation. Let's give ourselves 25 more seconds here. Not too long to work on the feet, that's for sure, but more time than we probably spend if we don't put this in class. And then when you feel right, let's release that ball to the side for now. Find your way back in a mountain and think about how the left and right side of the body feel here. Try to activate the arches in a way that is symmetrical, and note just kind of where we're feeling openness, where we're feeling restrictiveness, and then we'll sweep the arms up and overhead. Exhale through forward fold. Again, you can kind of note any inconsistencies. Inhale into half lift. Exhale back into fold. We'll walk our way back into down dog. And now as you get back into down dog, think about that right foot and pushing back into that full capacity of the right foot. Doing so by getting the hips up and back. And then we'll walk our way forward into fold. Inhale into half lift. Exhale back into fold. Let that whole body relax and release. We'll drift our awareness to our sacrum and we'll roll ourselves up vertebrae by vertebrae. Coming into mountain, re-interacting with our ball, this time on the left side. Same thing, we're just playing with that from the front of the heel bone, calcaneus bone, to the start of the ball of the foot in that arch. What you do with your toes will impact how that musculature is activated. So if you're lifting the toes, tissue gets a little bit more pulled. If you relax the toes, a little bit more elasticity. Try to find the amount of engagement that gives you the maximum benefit. Not necessarily the maximum amount of sensation, but sensation is probably a relatively decent sign that we're doing something right. And again, if you see those sticky spots, you can pause and try to twist those out. And we'll give ourselves about 25 more seconds on this second side. And then when it feels appropriate, we can set that ball to the side. Find your way back in a mountain. I guess the one thing to be careful here is when we bring some space into the feet, it's easy to collapse in on that inner arch. So stay active in the feet. And then sweep your arms up and overhead. Keep that activity in the feet, then exhale through forward fold. Inhale into half lift. Exhale back into fold. We'll plant our hands, walk our way back and into down dog. Get that depth and that space. Play with that toe lift. So come onto the tiptoes and then drop back into the heels and then come down to hands and knees tabletop. We'll flip the tops of the feet and sink back into child's pose. We land there. Just finding the familiar comfort with that shape. And then from that comfort and from that awareness around repetition, think about what you can do to adjust and deepen so you get the maximum benefit here. We'll give ourselves about 30 more seconds. And then when it feels appropriate, let's pull ourselves forward to hands and knees tabletop. Curl the toes underneath us. So from tabletop here, toes curl underneath, and then we're going to push the seat back towards the heels, activating the toes, the arches. For some of us, this can be pretty intense, and for others, it might feel okay or necessary to come up onto a little seat where you're using the heels as kind of a rest point and getting that full extension of the toes. And then we'll come back down to tabletop. Keep that toe curl. We'll lift the seat and roll back into down dog. Drift your weight back into your hips. Relax as you continue to elongate. And then let's walk forward into fold. Inhale into half lift. Exhale back into fold. Try to feel the space in the feet, giving you some more length. Drift your awareness to your sacrum, and we'll roll ourselves up vertebrae by vertebrae, coming into mountain. Bringing the hands together at heart center. Finding that ability to just be very vertical and strong. And then let's slide our left foot straight back and into lunge. If you land here, think about how the feet generally sit and see if you can get a little bit more depth in that back heel just from the space we have in the foot. And then let's ground the left heel and we'll roll open to 2. And then straighten that front leg and bring the arms up and overhead, palms together. And then just look, make sure that front foot is pointed straight out. We're going to turn the torso so that the left hip turns towards the front of your room. Try to keep those biceps up by the ears. And then just roll back into warrior 2. Let the arms blossom out. Try to feel that medial line expansion. Left heel spins up. We're going to find crescent. Push all the way back into that foot. Try to capture all of that space. And then let's drop the hands to heart center. I'll return to the front of the mat. Just breathing into a little bit of room here. And then we'll take this to the second side. Right foot slides straight back. landing and driving into that heel, really trying to maximize the foot space. Right heel grounds, we roll to warrior two. Slide back into your left hamstring, let the arms come together overhead. You can interlace those fingers and make index finger guns if that feels accessible. Check that front foot, make sure it's pointed straight forward. And then the right hip's gonna roll so that we can point the torso towards the front of the room. And then roll back into warrior two and land. Try to feel that medial line expansiveness. Right heel spins up, crescent. Push back through that right heel. Drop the hands to heart center, and we'll return to the front of the mat. Interlace your fingers here, and then give yourself like a little bit of a squeeze, like 25% squeeze of the hands. So there's a little bit of pressure there. Think about keeping the thumbs maybe like 3 or 4 inches from the center of the sternum and sink back in a chair. Push the hips all the way back and push down into the toes. And then we'll rise back up. Keep the hand pressure together as you extend the arms overhead. And then keep that hand pressure as you take yourself into forward fold. At the bottom of the fold, release the hands. You can just release the pressure and feel how the low back relaxes and you get that length. You can let the hands completely go, but all you need to do is release the pressure and let that low back expand. Let's inhale into half lift. Exhale back into fold. Plant your hands. We'll walk our way into plank. Plank is just a transition to lower us straight down to our bellies. And from our bellies, flex the quads, engage the glutes, engage the core, keep the hands right underneath the shoulders, develop that cobra-esque setup. And then let's take more or less a traditional baby cobra here. We'll just lift the forehead no more than 2 inches, but a little peel away from the mat. You can start to think about that sternum maybe lightening. Anchor that top of the toe mound and elongate the crown of the head so that the low back has the opportunity to expand towards the crown of your head, or with the crown of your head maybe. And then exhale and relax. Slide your hands underneath your forehead. Little crocodile pose. More or less focused on the low back relaxing here. Kind of a sneaky couple of pieces tied together that are all low back focused. And so there's this very adventurous king. We would think of him as kind of an Indiana Jones style figure. We'll give ourselves about 35 more seconds here. And so he's often off on these kind of conquests, treasure hunting. And on this particular morning, he's got up long before the sun, based on some intel that there is a genie lamp in a cave relatively nearby. He follows his information, and sure enough, there's a cave opening there. And so he ducks out of the sun as it starts to peak above the horizon and disappears into the darkness. When you're right, when you're ready, let's slide our hands back underneath our shoulders. We'll press ourselves up to hands and knees tabletop. Hands and knees tabletop. Let's once again curl those toes underneath us. We'll sit the seat back towards the heels. You can take yourself up to a vertical spine if that feels accessible. And again, if you feel like you need to go further, you can keep leaning back. You can place those hands behind you. None of these pieces are necessary. All we're looking to do is get the feet to activate. So you're just going back as far as it feels beneficial. And then we'll bring ourselves back to hands and knees tabletop. And let's take our toes and flip them over. So now we have the tops of the feet pressed into the mat. Now, actively press the tops of the feet down as much as you can. This is a pretty hard thing to do. We don't have a ton of, most of us don't have a ton of this capacity for strength from this shape. So as you're pushing those toes down, think about arching the middle of the back up, pressing the toes down, pressing the hands down. And as the middle of the back arches, it's even harder to hold that top of the feet energy. So as you're lifting, really concentrate on the toe down pressure and try to use that to leverage a higher arch. And then relax back to neutral. Flip the toes underneath you, and we're going to lift our way into down dog. As you go back into this down dog, try to drive the hips far enough back that you get the mid-back expansion. So we took that little excess flexion point, and now we're trying to get that mid-back, the structure of the mid-back to expand as we push. Yeah, nice, Lisa. And let's walk our way forward into fold. Good job. That was rad. Inhale into half lift. Exhale back into fold. Let your whole body relax into that fold. Try to feel the spine release as much as is possible into that fold. And then let's shift our awareness to our sacrum. We'll roll or sweep our way up into mountain. From mountain, hands coming together. Heart center. Take our right foot. We'll slide it straight back into lunge. Interlace the fingers. Index fingers can point towards the ceiling if that feels more comfortable for you. Push all the way back into that heel. Then drive the arms straight up. And then lift the chin so that you can gaze up in between the hands there. Maybe even squeeze the arms back just a little bit. And then we'll release the hands to heart center. Step forward. And relax. We should have some anterior space on that right quad. Try to find your way back to a level pelvic bowl. And then let's head over to side two. Left foot slides straight back. Pushing back into the heel. We're kind of using the space in the foot to elongate the shape in the same way we might work back and forth between a crescent and a warrior two. Fingers are interlaced here. We'll reach our way up. Biceps by the ears. We gaze up towards that space between the hands. And then maybe we start to squeeze those hands back just a little bit. Keep that back heel active and strong. And then we'll release the hands to heart center and step forward into that mountain. Note the amount of like stability musculature that was fired up. And we're going to go right after that again. So hands can stay at that heart center point. We'll give ourselves that 20% squeeze hand to hand. And then we're headed back into chair. So you come into this chair, your body is potentially going to fight this shape pretty hard. Really think about pushing the tailbone back. Keep that stability, that active, use all of the depth we've created, and then we'll rise back up, sweep the arms up and overhead, exhale through forward fold. At the bottom of the fold, you can release that hand pressure and let that hand pressure release drop you further into the shape, then inhale into half lift. Exhale back into fold. We'll walk back into down dog. Let's come down to hands and knees tabletop. And from hands and knees tabletop, we're sliding back into child's pose. Finding your depth here, and then finding the rhythm of your breath. We'll give ourselves 30 more seconds here. And let's pull ourselves forward to hands and knees tabletop, and then we'll extend the legs straight out in front of us into staff. Your choice here on what you do with forward fold. The knees can be bent and the arms can be underneath you. The knees can be bent and the hands can be on the toe mounds, or you could be in a more traditional shape. You could also be relatively vertical with the spine and just tilting into that expansiveness. Just finding a forward fold where we can get a little bit of length, no matter how hard that is to find. Remember, bending the knees more can make that easier. And so after he disappears into the darkness, he comes to a relatively quick dead end in this cave, and it's exactly what he expects. He starts feeling around on the wall of this cave in the darkness till he finds this rock, this loose stone. He slides it out of the way. It slides kind of like a door. And he reaches behind this into this little crevice and pulls a lever. And there's this sound of stone sliding open. And this beam of light comes down from the top of the cave and it hits this glass. It refracts into this glass and it shoots down kind of the middle of this cave. He starts fumbling around on the wall. He slides another rock out of the way. He reaches in. He pulls another lever. Last 20 seconds here. And again, this sound of grinding stone as this huge rock moves out of the way. And it opens up this passageway, and this beam of light shoots down this passageway. We'll walk ourselves up into feet. Bring the bottoms of the feet together. And let the knees be out wide here. And then we're just going to start to rock a little side to side. And as you're rocking, take your way further and further forward into this fold. We're playing here with the soft tissue with this movement side to side and just trying to coax it into giving us more and more space so we can fully express that structural length. Yeah, nice skip. Let's give ourselves about 25 more seconds to play with this. You can come to stillness if it feels right and appropriate. And then eventually we'll bring ourselves up into a seat. Let's keep the bottoms of the feet together, but slide the hands to the ankles if they're not there. And so we can pull those heels just a little bit closer and use that to give us a little bit of strength in the spinal stack. And then just turn your head over towards the left. And then we'll turn over towards the right. And back to the left. Try to keep that back musculature active. And over to the right. And we'll come back to neutral. Keep that back musculature active. Drop the chin to the sternum. We'll lift the chin to the ceiling. Drop the chin to the sternum. Lift the chin to the ceiling. Relax back to neutral. And let's release ourselves onto our spine. And here, kind of a little bit of a trick, right? Because we're acutely feeling all of that back work that we did with the rotation of the cervical spine. That being said, we went after the spinal column and its supportive musculature in some pretty unique ways. So let your body relax in here. We'll give ourselves a little over 60 seconds to just come to terms with where we are right now. Remember that the legs don't need to be extended. The knees can be bent. You can adjust into a shape that feels ideal for your spine. Last 20 seconds here. Just letting your body land. That same familiarity that you have with child's pose, right? It's completely at ease in the shape. And then when it feels appropriate, let's bring our knees into a bent position if they're not already there. pull your left knee in kind of towards your left armpit and then extend your right leg. The right hand can come over to help here. We're going to take that left knee out nice and wide. The only thing about the right hand coming over is we don't want to roll over. We want to keep that right shoulder anchored, even if the hand is providing a little support. But we're really trying to get that left hip out wide, almost like a reverse half frog here. If you think about flipping the shape over on your belly, that's more or less the intention we're mimicking. This, I think, gets a little bit deeper because we have the compression activity of really drawing that knee up. We can have that compression activity anyway. And then we'll relax the left leg down to mirror the right. Whew. And then when it feels appropriate, we'll bend both knees. Get that restabilization. Try to feel the sacrum balance. And the right knee is going to come in. We'll pull that out towards the armpit. The left leg extends. We really work on keeping the torso, the shoulders anchored, and then we start to drive that right knee towards the armpit. Deep external rotation, but also really solid compression at the hip joint. Just breathe into that space we're creating. And then when you feel balance left to right, we'll release the right leg down to mirror the left. Land there. And then we'll inhale and bend both knees and caps point towards the ceiling. Let's let the knees just find a little dynamic sway, just moving towards what feels really good for you. Give ourselves about 15 more seconds just to explore the movement. And then when it feels appropriate, let's just let both knees fall to the left and we'll settle into a little twist. So this beam of light just shoots down this cave corridor now. And at the back of this cave, on this little pedestal, sure enough, there's an oil lamp. King rushes down the one side of the cave, careful to avoid the light. He gets so close and his excitement overtakes him. He steps in between the oil lamp and the beam of light. And as soon as he does so, the floor beneath him starts to give way. As he's falling through the floor, he reaches up, he grabs the oil lamp, and he starts to rub it. And then he falls to his death. wakes up. In some kind of an afterworld with a genie next to him. The genie's holding a genie handbook and he's rapidly thumbing through the pages. And the king looks over at this genie and says, "Boy, am I glad you're here. Think I know how I'm going to use one of my wishes." Last 30 seconds here. And the genie kind of rolls his eyes and shoves a handbook in his face with his finger pointed to this very particular rule. The genie says, "The rules are different here. You don't get three wishes, you get one." And I can't believe after waiting in that cave for all those years, this is where I am right now. And the king kind of scoffs and he says, "Well, the one wish isn't going to be that hard to figure out. I'll wish myself back." And the genie kind of gets a little glint in his eye. When you're right, when you're ready, knees come back to neutral. And then we'll let the knees fall over to that second side, the right side. And the genie says, sure, you could wish yourself back. And it's true, you only get one wish. Well, why don't we get a little creative? Why don't you wish yourself back into a world that you most want to live in? And the king kind of smiles back. He's like, "Oh, I like the way this genie thinks." And so they start to plan how they can craft a wish where the king can return to a world more suited to benefit him. And they go through the monetary system. They make some tweaks to benefit the king. And they go through the political system and they make some tweaks to benefit the king. The social systems, and they make some tweaks to benefit the king. And on and on. The genie's just constantly taking these notes of these little adjustments, little revisions the king would make if the world were more perfectly suited to him. Last 15 seconds here. And then when it feels appropriate, let's bring our knees back to neutral. We'll let the bottoms of the feet come together and the knees fall out wide. We won't be here too long, but just enough to allow for a full reset of the sacrum. And then when it feels appropriate, when you feel like you've got the hips integrated, we'll bring the knees back together and ask yourself if there's anything you might want, need, or benefit from prior to Shavasana. If there is, we'll offer that to ourselves now. If you have everything you need and you're ready for some stillness, let's find our way into a shape where we can appreciate some. And then we'll just get into a spot where we can find our version of Shavasana tonight. And so the king and this genie work together to craft and create this world that the king wants to go back into. And after some amount of work and effort, they come to something that they think is ideal. And so after the genie and the king agree on the world he's going to go back into, the genie kind of waves his hand and this doorway appears. He leads the king into this next room. And it's this room set up with all these huge lottery machines. And the king says, what are we doing here? And Genie gets this wry little smile, that Genie's always got to win the deal and the wish. And so he says, well, now we know the world you're going back into. We got to determine what you're going to go back as. And so over each of these machines, there are all these labels: gender, race, IQ, abilities and disabilities. The genie pulls a lever and all these balls start to move. And the king looks on in absolute terror. We'll start to bring some movement into our fingers and our toes, into our wrists, our ankles, shoulders and hips, neck and head, jaw, eyes, tongue. Eventually, the entirety of the body will move, and we'll utilize that movement to transition from the shapes we are in back into a seat. In that seated space, spine gets tall, breath gets fluid, eyes close. And we'll inhale our hands together, heart center. Over the course of the next 7 days, can you ask yourself how the world would be different if it was set up to benefit everyone who plays the ovarian lottery? And see how that impacts your experience. Thank you so much for being a part of this evening's practice and for being you. Namaste. Happy Monday, guys. Appreciate the heck out of you being here. No class next Monday, thanks to the holiday. So have a beautiful week. And I love the heck out of you. I'll see you soon. Mwah.